Hello, this week we are doing project number 2 in the book, How to See Color and Paint It by Arthur Stern. You know, if you're watching this in a series, that I've already discussed a little bit about how this book is absolutely transformative. The best way I can describe it is it's kind of like semester 1 and 2 of a college level painting course. It's not the most in-depth as far as like every single technique, but I feel like the information in this book is absolutely foundational for building a painting practice on. Basically, this book is 22, if I'm not mistaken, projects over the span of the book. The first couple chapters are laying out the vocabulary, the color wheel, the materials, of course. And then once the book sort of gets started into these projects, we go over really simple projects and they become increasingly more difficult as the book continues and you actually begin to up level. But the thing that's really important about this book is that it trains you to be able to see. And that is a part that as an arts educator who has been teaching online and in person and in retreats for many, many years, I have seen students struggle with the most. You can practice drawing all you want, you can do value studies, but if you don't train your eye to see color, you will never go from someone who can document and maybe record, with the best of them, it's its own skill, to someone who really understands color deeply, unless you get these formative skills. It's not to say that the book is the only way to do that, of course not. There are many different strategies for really truly seeing color better, but I think this book lays it out really well. And so that's why I am working through this book this year. All that to say, what are we learning in Project 2? If last week we learned that a white object, such as this stark white roll of toilet paper, is not in fact all the way light, we can see here that the front of this is this dark grayish, almost black kind of color. And this week we are learning that a black object, in this case a black wooden cube, I painted it with my own tube of Mars black, so it is certainly black, can actually take on different colors. It's reflecting back the red ground as well as sort of the green of the yellow wall behind it. And I think what's really cool about this is we can see that even though something is technically the actual color, if you went up to it with a spectrometer and sort of got the exact hex code, even though it is clearly a black object, an object is always being influenced by the colors around it, both in the way that our eyes pick up the color, but also just by simply having the light around it bounce off of it. Arthur Stern talks about these multiple undulating, compounding phenomenon when we see color that make it kind of tricky, because the thing is, a trained painter can go in a field and look out at a vista and decipher what pigments they would mix to mix those colors after, again, years of training. But I would never sort of look down or blame, or I would be very understanding if someone who had never mixed color before or was very new to painting or specifically color would go out and sort of see the colors as they are without doing that key translation, because it takes practice. And like, why does my painting not look like the real thing? And sort of unwiring the way we know color as we navigate the world in real life, aka 99.9% of our waking hours, versus how we need to understand color as a painter, which is different. And it's by breaking down that phenomenon into these small, bite-sized projects that we begin to sort of tease that apart. All that to say, let's jump into watching this unfold in a time lapse. And just know that if you want to watch these happen in real time and ask questions directly into the chat every other week whenever I go live in my online art school, you're welcome to join my online art school. It is called Not Sari Art School. I made it in 2020 as a virtual platform during the pandemic to teach and continue sharing my knowledge that I built into workshops with a virtual online audience. It has a great community component as part of the lifetime membership, which is something I recommend. Don't let the name fool you. Lifetime membership is a one-time payment, and then you will get to be a part of the community for life. In addition to that, you get the 16 and counting educational videos. I have Color Theory 2, Applied Color Theory, coming out very shortly if you're watching this as it is been uploaded. If you're watching this in the future, it's already out. I'm proud of it. Please go check it out if you want to understand color theory on a very robust, in-depth level. I do recommend that course. And if you don't know if e-learning is right for you, check out the 7-day free boot camp that I have designed. Not only is the information in that amazing and helpful and really hits all the key points of painting that I love to teach, such as value and drawing and of course color. This way you can sort of take it, try it, see if it's right for you before you jump into being a lifetime member. So as always, I like to start with a neutral gray background. This is something that Arthur Stern doesn't necessarily speak to in the book, but as I mentioned in my first videos that I made when we went through the sort of setup chapters in the book, aka again the materials and the language, etc., I'm combining a lot of what Arthur Stern teaches in the book with a little bit of my background knowledge as a teacher and an artist myself. I had an amazing college painting professor who actually has a tremendous amount of overlap with sort of the way he explains things with Arthur Stern. So for me, this is a very natural fit to combine these elements together into a course. But starting with that neutral gray helps you to be able to work forward and backwards in your value. Value is just how light or how dark color is. If you feel like you struggle with value, if it's something that you don't feel like you have a lot of control over, maybe you're better at drawing and you have fun with the colors, but it's just looking kind of flat and cartoony in a way that is uncanny and unfavorable, I would recommend starting with that middle gray gesso or just middle gray paint, letting it dry and then jumping in. Of course, I should say in these first 4 projects, Arthur Stern just has us work through what's called our first impression or our first statement. And basically, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, as the book progresses, you will get more and more detail built on the painting. So of course we're starting out with really simple things: cubes, toilet paper rolls, eventually an orange, a potato in the next few chapters. And as simple as those objects are, by the time you get to the end of the book, you are painting very complex compound objects, of course building on our base knowledge. But in these first 4 chapters, we are only doing our first statement. That is to say, we're not really looking for the subtleties in things like the planes, but just like the big statements that you see. So if you squint your eyes or blur your eyes, or if you can't do that, you can always take a Gaussian blur filter into something like Procreate. And when you lose all the edges and detail, what still is there? What is still in your sight line at that point? And it's really trying to prioritize those things as opposed to getting the detail. This is of course a key principle in direct painting, which is you start really, really general and broad, and then you develop specificity as you go. I think this is perhaps one of the most helpful ways to build a painting if you want to feel like you're in control the whole time and work on creating depth in some areas and have the painting be looser in others. This is a great strategy to adopt. Another key thing to keep in mind as you're watching this is at no time do I ever actually use a true black, which brings me to sort of, I think, a conversation that I see get hashed out on painting, YouTube, TikTok, name your platform, and that is whether or not to use black from the tube. I think generally speaking, like with most things in painting and certainly most things in art, it's up to you. Art is great because there really is no right or wrong. You know, it isn't science. There's, I suppose, loose ethics, but other than that, you can do whatever you would like. There's really no right or wrong. But I will say when I was in college, our painting professor told us to not buy black other than to use for mixing our medium gray gesso. So when we did our paintings, we were required to have a full chroma palette. So pretty similar to what I'm using here. So a cad yellow light, a phthalo, a cadmium red, etc. And learn to be able to mix black from your colors. In fact, one thing that Arthur Stern said in one of his early chapters, which I actually, as an educator, I really admire his ability to sort of be decisive on this fact, and that is he calls gray, white, brown, black dirty words, and of course solely within the context of this painting book, but as a way to force you to name the hue even as it becomes increasingly low chroma. What does that mean, Sari? Basically, whenever you look at colors, it's easy to just say, oh, those are all shades of gray, but if you've really forced yourself to isolate that color and say, well, is this actually a really grayish purple? Is it a grayish blue? And by continuing to sort of push yourself to use the chromatic name, the hue name, even as it becomes pretty gray, or in this case, black, you actually give yourself more information to sit down and mix. So, language is really tied, in my opinion, to painting. So being able to look at something, name it, and then look at your colors you have in front of you and sort of amalgamate, like that seems like a fairly easy thing to do. But if you're watching this and you've ever painted, you know that it is easy to get snagged in any of those steps. And so by forcing yourself to say the name out loud, I mean, I even say it out loud. I'm kind of a crazy person. I talk to myself when I'm deep in thought, but whether you're saying it literally out loud or with your inner monologue, getting yourself to sort of use those words for as long as possible is helpful. So for how this would work with black is, even outside of Mars black straight from the tube, very, very, very dark muted blue is also often seen as black. Very, very, very dark muted red or maroon is often seen as black. And so by looking at all the different kinds of black that you have within your black cube and even the cast shadow, you're really forcing yourself to see the chroma in a color that is otherwise very neutral. And like I said, this book is all about, it kind of reminds me of being an athlete. I was a college athlete, college runner. You know, my painting philosophy tends to mirror that, not so much in that it's really intense and hard, but rather in that it's all about repetition and getting in the reps over making every single painting perfect. You know, not every painting has to be a masterpiece, just like not every run has to be a personal best, but rather that you sort of get in the reps. And I think the reps that we're getting in with this project is looking at all the different specific shades of black that are actually reflecting all the colors around it. And if you're following the instructions, if you're looking at this and doing this on your own, I should say that I have the reference photo included in the blog, which is free and attached to this video. I highly recommend you look at it, especially if you want a Spark Notes version of this lesson. But you can see all the different shades of black that we were able to tease out. It seems like a small thing to notice, but I am telling you, if this is the kind of thing you can develop the sensitivity to interpret and nail the little subtlety of not just simply painting a black cube and mixing a little bit of white to the top part, but actually looking for the chroma in the black, you will be unstoppable. Okay, maybe that's a little hyperbole. Forgive my Americanism there, but what I'm trying to say is developing that sensitivity to chroma, even on a very, very dark muted neutral, is a superpower. And I do believe that that is what we're trying to learn in this chapter. If that's something you can develop and take away, or at least draw awareness to, I should say that when you're learning to paint, step one is kind of being aware of it, even if you can't nail it. Step two is getting to where you can nail it every once in a while. And the final sort of step is getting to where, with some consistency, you can sort of get these principles most of the time. And that is, I think, a good thing to keep in mind. Practice takes time. These things take time to sort of develop. All that to say, hopefully that was helpful. I am excited for all the feedback that I've been getting from these videos. I think this is a great project to work on. I know that I certainly have benefited from sort of going back to the basics. You know, I am 15 years into painting. I am 10 plus years into painting professionally. And even still, I can always benefit from going back to the basics and shoring things up and double checking and really spending time with the most essential elements of painting. I think it's always helpful. Certainly, if you are newer to this, I'm hoping that it is tremendously helpful. Feel free to leave any questions below and give me any feedback, share your work with me. You can tag me on Instagram or TikTok, or certainly on YouTube as well. I would love to hear how you guys are doing. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in next week's project.